What if one morning, your neighbor's lies brought armed deputies storming onto your land, even though you weren't part of their HOA at all? Imagine standing there confused and furious as your home, your family, even your future is suddenly threatened by rules that were never supposed to apply to you. What would you do? Fight back? Or fold under the pressure? Let me start from beginning. What if the trouble in your neighborhood didn't start with a fight or a fence, but with a smirk? That's how it began for Nate. Not with a lawsuit, not with a warning letter, but with a smug smile from Madison, the HOA president's daughter. Madison wasn't just any teenager. She was the kind who had been raised on fake rules, the kind who thought every driveway, every lawn, every house in the subdivision was hers to inspect. Her mom, Karen, had taught her that. If Karen was the queen of the HOA, Madison was the princess. Spoiled, untouchable, and armed with enough phony bylaw talk to make even grown adults hesitate. At first, it was little things. She'd walk up and snap pictures of Nate's trash cans, claiming they weren't compliant. She once stood on his porch and declared his doormat was not HOA approved. Nate wasn't even in the HOA. His property was technically just outside its borders, but that didn't stop her. For Madison, boundaries didn't exist. If she wanted to film you, lecture you, or snoop through your things, she would. And if you pushed back, she'd smirk, flip her hair, and say, "Mom will handle it." That smirk drove Nate crazy. He'd learned to pick his battles, but every little intrusion chipped away at his patience. And then came the day Madison crossed a line so sharp it set the whole neighborhood ablaze. It was a Saturday morning. Nate had just finished polishing his pride and joy, a rugged ATV he'd spent 6 months restoring after work, piece by piece. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was therapy, a project that had gotten him through sleepless nights after his father's passing. The garage smelled faintly of oil and fresh paint, and for a brief moment, life felt steady until Madison showed up. She leaned against her mom's golf cart at the edge of his driveway, phone already in hand, filming like she was about to star in her own little reality show. That smirk again. The same one that said, "Everything you built belongs to me." "That's a nice toy," she called out, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. Nate didn't even look up. "Not a toy," he said flatly, wiping down the seat. "And you're standing on private property." "Technically," she shot back, stretching the word out, "the driveway counts as common area. By law, Section 7, Paragraph C. Mom says so." It was nonsense, of course, but that was Madison's weapon. Bogus rules, repeated with so much confidence you almost believed her. Nate didn't flinch. "Step 1 foot closer and it's trespassing," she laughed. A short, sharp sound, and then her eyes drifted past him, toward the shelf in the garage. That's when she spotted it, a small magnetic key box stuck to the metal frame. The backup key. Nate felt his stomach sink. He caught the look in her eyes. The glint. The calculation. She wasn't just snooping anymore. She was plotting. "Mom says your ATV's a violation anyway," she sneered. Too loud, too ugly, not in keeping with the neighborhood's aesthetic. "It's in my garage," Nate replied, his voice steady. "And you don't live here." He turned his back, hoping she'd get bored. That was his mistake. The quiet stretched too long. When Nate finally glanced back, Madison was gone. At the same moment, his phone buzzed with a motion alert from the garage camera. He tapped the screen and froze. There she was, caught on video, darting into the garage, plucking the magnetic box off the shelf, pulling out the key like she'd done it before. She looked straight into the lens with a grin that screamed invincible. Seconds later, the roar of the ATV engine shattered the quiet street. Neighbors peeked through curtains as Madison, still live streaming on her phone, swung her leg over the seat and winked at Nate like she'd just won. Then she gunned it, tires spitting gravel as she shot down the street, laughing into the camera. Nate's hands tightened into fists. 6 months of work, stolen in seconds. And worse, this wasn't a prank. It was a statement. Madison was showing everyone she could take whatever she wanted. Pam, Nate's wife, stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, just in time to see the ATV vanish. "Tell me I didn't just see Madison steal your ride," she said. "You did," Nate muttered, showing her the camera footage. His voice was calm, too calm, like a storm was building just beneath the surface. And she's broadcasting it live! The call to 911 came fast. But the chase, that unfolded in real time. Madison wasn't just joyriding. She was weaving across lanes, laughing into her phone, swerving dangerously close to parked cars. Neighbors stepped out onto lawns, watching in disbelief. Sirens wailed in the distance. Soon, squad cars boxed her in, lights flashing. Any other kid might have stopped. Not Madison. She yanked the handlebars, cutting hard onto a smaller residential street. That's when everything spiraled. It was Willow Creek Lane, a road filled with kids on bikes, parents walking dogs, a young mother pushing a stroller. Nate's heart stopped as the ATV fishtailed, veering toward the sidewalk. Sarah, the mother, had just enough time to shove the stroller aside before Madison clipped the wheel. The stroller toppled, wheels spinning, as the ATV smashed into the curb and flipped. Madison went flying into a rosebush, screaming. For one terrifying second, the neighborhood fell silent. Then the baby cried, scared but safe. The sound was raw relief. Neighbors rushed forward, pulling Sarah to her feet. Tom, her husband, sprinted from their house, his face pale as chalk. He scooped the baby into his arms, trembling with shock. Everyone was shaken, but alive, all except Madison's illusion of untouchability. That had just shattered in front of the whole street. Police swarmed the scene, securing the ATV and checking on Sarah. Madison sat dazed in the bushes, still clutching her phone, tears streaking her face. And then came the moment that changed everything. Karen arrived. She screeched up in her SUV, storming out in a pastel tracksuit, sunglasses on, fury blazing. She didn't ask if Sarah or the baby were okay. She didn't even glance at the wreckage. She went straight to her daughter. "My baby," Karen wailed, pulling Madison close. "What did they do to you?" That's when Tom snapped. Still clutching his child, he shouted, "What did she do?" "Your daughter almost killed my baby." His voice cracked through the air like thunder. For the first time, neighbors didn't look away. They didn't whisper. They didn't side with Karen. They stood with Tom, arms crossed, faces hard, the weight of years of HOA abuse boiling to the surface. Karen tried to wave a paper at the police, some ridiculous medical exemption she'd signed herself, claiming Madison couldn't be held responsible. But the officer barely looked at it before handing it back. "This isn't a legal document, ma'am. Her tricks, her power plays, her fake authority, none of it worked anymore." Not when the whole community had just seen how dangerous her rule really was. The crowd wasn't angry at Madison alone. They were angry at what she represented. The fake rules, the bullying, the fear they'd all lived under. And now, in the middle of Willow Creek Lane, with a crying baby in his arms, Tom had spoken the words everyone else had been too scared to say. Enough. That was the moment the neighborhood began to turn. And for Karen, it was the first crack in an empire she thought she controlled. Because if her daughter's recklessness could no longer be covered up with smirks, lies, and fake papers, what else might the community uncover about the way the HOA had been run? And that's where the story really begins. By the time Nate thought things couldn't get worse, the HOA made their biggest mistake. They took their threats public. It started with a cease and desist letter, thick legal paper with a cheap watermark, delivered by some smug courier like it was the Constitution itself. The letter accused Nate of endangering the community, housing dangerous wildlife, and obstructing neighborhood harmony. To anyone who didn't know better, it might have looked official. But to Nate, it was laughable. He wasn't even part of their HOA. They had no legal standing. Yet the language was designed to scare him. Pages of legal jargon that basically boiled down to one thing. Shut up and submit, or we'll bury you. But instead of burying him, the letter lit a fire. Nate posted it online. Within hours, screenshots of the HOA's threats were spreading across social media. Neighbors who had been too scared to speak suddenly found courage behind a keyboard. Former homeowners in other states chimed in, "That's exactly how my HOA came after me." Small YouTubers picked it up first, channels dedicated to HOA horror stories, local corruption, and neighborhood drama. Then bigger creators jumped on board. The story had all the ingredients for a viral hit. A power-drunk HOA president, fake rules, harassment, and a bear sanctuary at the center of it all. And just when the buzz was reaching its peak, a whistleblower stepped forward. It was someone Nate never expected, a former HOA secretary who had quit months earlier. She reached out anonymously at first, nervous about retaliation. But once she saw the public heat turning against Karen, she came clean. She had kept copies of emails, meeting notes, and even voice recordings. And the files were damning. They showed exactly how Karen had weaponized HOA rules to target anyone who didn't fall in line. If she didn't like your car color, suddenly your mailbox was out of compliance. If she wanted your property, suddenly you were being fined for grass height or improper use of space. And buried in those files was the biggest revelation. Karen's so-called head of security, Alan, wasn't some neutral enforcer. He was her cousin. Alan had a history of intimidation, stretching back years. Complaints had been filed against him for trespassing, for harassing residents, even for carrying a gun while patrolling the neighborhood. Every time Karen buried the paperwork. To outsiders, Alan was just a loyal HOA officer. To insiders, he was muscle, her blunt instrument. Once this came out, the internet exploded. What had started as one man's fight with his HOA became a full-on expose of corruption, abuse of power, and family favoritism. But Karen didn't fold. No, she lashed out. That's when the retaliation began. One morning, Nate walked out to find the chicken coop empty. His hens, his little side project, were gone. The lock had been cut clean. It wasn't random theft. It was a message. The HOA was escalating from paper threats to real ones. Then came the letters. Glossy envelopes slipped under neighbors' doors, filled with slander. They claimed Nate was unstable, dangerous, and endangering families with his reckless behavior. Some letters even suggested he had violent tendencies. It was classic gaslighting. Paint the victim as the threat so people question the truth. But this time it backfired. Nate didn't hide. He fought fire with fire, and he did it online. He posted videos, calmly laying out the harassment, showing documents, even telling the story of Maple, the rescued bear who had become a symbol of his sanctuary. His videos were raw, unpolished, but real, and people connected with that. One clip of Maple waddling up to Nate for a snack while Nate explained the harassment went viral. Tens of thousands of people shared it, calling Maple the HOA bear and joking that she should run for president. With the internet now fully against them, the HOA lost control of the narrative. Local reporters camped outside the subdivision. Cameras caught Karen storming out of meetings, yelling at journalists. Alan tried to intimidate one news crew and got himself arrested on the spot. That was the first crack. The second came when state investigators got involved. Turns out, once you shine enough light, bigger authorities pay attention. County inspectors, state regulators, even the FBI started digging into the HOA's finances. And what they found wasn't pretty. Fraud, mismanagement, kickbacks, funds that were supposed to go to community projects were redirected into shell accounts. And whose name kept popping up? Karen's. The dominoes fell quickly after that. Alan was formally arrested for intimidation and trespassing. Karen was served with multiple lawsuits, not just from Nate, but from former neighbors she had bullied over the years. People who had been too scared to speak now lined up with stories. Her empire of fear was crumbling in real time. And here's the twist. The same neighbors who once glared at Nate, who whispered about him behind closed doors, began knocking on his door with apologies. They admitted they had believed Karen's lies. They confessed they had been scared of losing their homes or being fined into bankruptcy, and they thanked him for standing up when no one else dared. Through it all, Maple became a kind of folk hero. Nate's videos of her went beyond HOA drama. They became about resilience, about protecting something pure when the world tries to crush it. Children wrote letters calling Maple brave. News anchors chuckled about her during evening broadcasts. She became more than a bear. She was a symbol. But just when Nate thought it was finally over, one last twist landed in his mailbox. It was a plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No threats this time. No legal jargon. Just one line, handwritten in sharp, deliberate script. This isn't finished. There was no signature. No proof it was from Karen or her allies. But Nate felt the weight of it all the same. Even with Karen facing lawsuits and Alan behind bars, the shadow of their influence still lingered. And as he folded the letter back into the envelope, one thought stayed with him. Sometimes fighting for land isn't about fences or deeds. It's about standing up when lies threaten to bury the truth.